So that went on a little long, but I think today might just be a long episode because we gotta get into our next story. Let's go ahead and get on to our main story. Now, I said in the beginning, I've never really been scared of gray aliens. I have a friend named Jackie. She's terrified of them. Every so often, I'll just send her a picture on Facebook of a gray alien, like you're a point of view of an abductee looking up at a gray alien, and she totally flips out. She's always been terrified of them. I know, and that's pretty mean, but she does the grudge noise and all that stuff, so she gets back at me. But I've never been scared of gray aliens. I've never been scared of aliens in general, but specifically like gray aliens. I've always been like, they have no muscle matter. You know, you could just beat them up. You could easily take at least 3 or 4 of those dudes in a fist fight. No problem. But then I read about this, and I think the reason why it creeps me out is, 1, it makes sense. 2, I often say on the show that I don't believe aliens are from space. I believe they're either from Earth or from another dimension. And when you read an article that not only confirms your belief, or reaffirms your belief is probably a better word, but makes, the problem is aliens, to me, there's part of this kind of this magical thinking, like, they have the ship that can beam stuff up, and they can erase your memory, and they can paralyze you and do all this stuff. You're kind of like, but when you can take those elements and make them realistic, you have to step back and go, maybe there is something like that. So, I've always been torn on the idea of aliens, because again, I've never seen one. I've seen ghosts and demons and all sorts of stuff, so I totally believe in those, but I've never seen an alien. So I'm always like, I'll give the person telling me the story the benefit of the doubt. I'll trust what they're saying, because I know them. But I've just never seen one myself, so I'm always kind of like, well, they might be real. But this story kind of made me go, I'm kind of leaning a little more towards it. And they're a little spooky. So this is the theory, and this is on the conspiracy iceberg, that and it's going to sound funny at first, but this is a really interesting read. Gray aliens are actually evolved dolphins. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean they're evolved and they're from the future, which is kind of what I thought the angle was at first, and I was like, you want me to accept aliens and time travel in the same article? But the article, and there's quite a few articles on this, it really lays it out. So we're going to go back in time to talk about this. Now, science shows that dolphins actually have little fingers in their little flipper things. They have little fingers. And in the fetus, a dolphin fetus and a human fetus look the same. They have little hands, little face, they don't, the big snout hasn't shown up. They do, and I looked at, and I was like, really? And I looked at the pictures, I'm like, those do look creepily the same. And so there's 2 schools of thought. One is that dolphins used to be land creatures that moved into the water and evolved to exist in the ocean. They're just like, screw you, land. And they kind of crawled off or walked in if they were bipedal. And then just over the million... I always think this is kind of ridiculous about evolution. You're telling me that every so often a dog ran to the river, and then eventually a baby came out and it was a dolphin. Like, I know it's not that simple, but the idea of a dog going out farther and farther each generation and then finally saying, I don't need this fur. But anyways, for whatever reason, I know it's a little more complicated than that. I got 100 science majors yelling into their phones right now. Anyway, so if you guys aren't yelling every episode, but anyway, so the dolphins used to be land animals. They moved into the water, and that's why they have so many similarities. And they're mammals, and they have little fingers, and they look like little human babies. But then there's another theory that dolphins were sea creatures. They evolved to walk on land because they were getting closer and closer to the shore. It's kind of the reverse. And then the species said, screw this, I'm going back under the water. Because they don't necessarily know where it started. Now, that might seem a little more fishy. Get it? A little fishy? But it's a theory that's out there. That dolphins were a sea animal, and then they came to land, and then they went back. And it's possible, too, that it was a land animal that went to the water, and then came back onto the land, and then went back onto the water. We don't know. I mean, we just can look at the similarities and the little fingers and stuff like that, and stuff that makes us think this might have been a land animal at some point. But the theory is this. What if there was a split in the species where there was a dolphin-like creature, and at one point, let's take the original scenario first. We can do both of them. A wolf, a canine, some sort of land creature evolves into be a dolphin. And then eventually the species splits, where some of them stay in the ocean, but others do evolve to come back onto land. Those would be the gray aliens. So we're not talking about time travel or anything like that. We're talking about a separate species that lived among the normal species on the planet Earth, but had a different evolutionary pattern. So they would have been here as well for millions of years. Let's go over what a gray alien looks like real quick. Gray aliens are generally seen to be about 5 feet 5 inches. They're humanoid, 2 arms, 2 legs. They have the big skull, the big black eyes, tiny little mouth. They tend to be gray, and it's a non-porous skin. It's a very kind of a dolphin-like skin. But it has like the large head, kind of the curved skull. The back of the skull is rounded at the top, and the eyes are kind of slanted towards the back. So this is what they share in common with modern-day dolphins. Same skin, according to people who have reportedly seen them and interacted with them. Same skin, color, and touch. It has a very slick touch. They don't have pores like we do. Both have the large rounded front of the skull and the bump on the back of the skull. And you're like, well, that's weird. I see dolphins and they're kind of smooth, but the research, the conspiracy is talking about if you took the skull of a dolphin, please don't do that, but if you took the skull of a dolphin, it would have that same basic shape. Now, the thing with the eyes, the big black eyes, that's something we generally see in creatures who live in a reduced light environment, which is what the ocean would be considered. You have those black eyes. And people have reported seeing what they thought was some sort of protective covering over the eyeballs, which is also something that sea creatures have, and something that dolphins have. But here's the creepiest part. This is when I kind of was like, oh, this is getting creepy. Because I could take any two animals and go, well, a dog has 4 legs and a camel has 4 legs. And especially one that hasn't been proven by science, you can work with the stuff. But this was, I think, one of the creepiest parts. Because, again, it fits into UFO lore, and it makes sense. There's no magic involved to do this. Dolphins can release an ultrasonic blast, basically. And we've known that they can do this. It's an ultrasound, where they will be swimming, and they'll see a fish, and they'll go, and we won't hear it, because it's an ultrasound. But the fish, 1 of 3 things will happen. It will get disoriented, and it'll start swimming around in circles, and the dolphin will eat it. It will straight up get stunned and sit there, and the dolphin will eat it. Or it just liquefies their organs and they die. It's a hunting technique that the dolphins have learned. It's a skill that they have in particular, where they can direct this ultrasound towards a living creature, and it will disorient them. At the very least, you won't be able to control or think. You won't be able to think about what's going on. At the very most, it'll kill you, but it can also just stun you. And the theory is this. In reports of gray aliens abducting people, you have the person waking up in the middle of the night, lights are all off, there's a figure at the foot of their bed, and they can't move. Let me read you this quote here. They're talking about this ultrasound with the gray aliens. The result was physical paralysis and disorientation. I believe that this is the very same technique used by the Greys in abductions. The similarities are overwhelming. Every abductee says that when they are abducted, they are paralyzed and become mentally disoriented. This is usually in the presence of a Grey. The most striking thing they recall is what is called the stare. This is when the Grey looks directly at an abductee. The large dark eyes capture the abductee's attention immediately. They then report being unable to move and a feeling of great mental disorientation. On some rare occasions, abductees report a lessening of these effects when the Grey looked away from them. This indicates that the intensity of the effect was directly proportional to the direction or focus of the front portion of the Grey's head. When the alien turns its head, it feels like you have a little bit more control over your body. And dolphins have to be looking at the fish to direct that ultrasound attack. If it moves its head, the fish can reorient itself or start moving again, because it's a directed beam. So is it possible that's why you can't move when a gray alien shows up. Because they're looking right at you and you can never hear it, but they're directing that same ultrasound attack beam and you're just completely frozen. And when they turn to look at another gray, you can kind of start getting reoriented. You can kind of start feeling your fingers move and your toes wiggle, and then it turns back to you and you're frozen again. So it's looking down at you. That's creepy, personally. That's really, really creepy. That's what's causing people, when they wake up, it's not sleep paralysis. The reason why they can't move is because the gray alien is directing this ultrasound attack. Could it be so advanced, not technologically, but just skill-wise, that that's what can cause for disorientation, leading to things like missing time? Or forgetting the event and having just simple flashbacks about it? Let's deal real quickly, and the conspiracy theory doesn't go so far into this, but I know your questions are, what about the spaceships? Where do they live? Here's the thing, if they're evolved to live in low-light environments, Earth has these massive tunnel systems that have never been fully explored and will never fully be explored. So if they can't still live underwater, they don't have blowholes, they have regular old faces, they've evolved to live on land, they could be in any cave system in the world. And when we look at Native American legends from around the world, we find stories of cursed caves, of gods coming out of caves, and things like that. What about the UFOs? The technology needed to build a UFO, we don't know about. And that's where we start to get into the science fiction magic part of the theory again. Flying ships that don't require jet fuel, that can hover, that can beam people aboard. These are all things we don't know about. But my argument always was about aliens coming from another planet. Is that to build a box and to move in that box from location A to location B, I believe is an Earth concept. We do it. Ants do it. The idea of looking at a river and going, I need to cross that. That must mean I need a vehicle. That's an Earth concept. I think that is a way. The reason why I say it's an Earth concept is because I think, let's say you lived on a planet that had absolutely no rivers. It all had wells, underground water supply. You wouldn't know what a boat was. You would never need one. But our planet has rivers and lakes and oceans and streams and all of this stuff. So even an ant looks at a stream and goes, I need to get to the other side of that. That must mean I need a boat. And they're not actually building a boat, but they'll take leaves and they'll float across. And I think if a million species evolved on a planet with all the water was underground, and you would just kind of spring up, and you just take a little lip, take a little slurp, you would never, if they saw a boat, they'd be like, what's that? What's the point of putting stuff on that? I mean, just walk over there. So on and so forth. The same thing if everything was ocean and there was no land, you wouldn't need boats anyways. Everything would be evolved to swim. So this idea of building a transport vehicle to go from one location to another, I think is a Earth design because we need those to exist on our planets. A gas giant, they wouldn't need those. They're just like, and they'd hold their breath and they'd float around. They wouldn't think, oh, you know what I need to do? I need to mine stuff and then build rockets. A planet with no warfare would never have rocket technology. All of this stuff. We look at all these variables that are needed to build a starship. And you need a particular type of society to do it. You need a society that is communal and curious. One without the other, they would never build a spaceship. They could be super utopian. But if they're not a curious species, they're never going to go, what's out there? And you could have a curious species, but they're super barbaric. That's always bugged me about Klingons. Who's the engineer in the Klingons? Who's building those ships? They're all a bunch of warriors. The same thing with the Predators. Who works on the Predator planet and they design ships and all the other Predators make fun of them because they don't have alien skulls on their wall. But building vessels and flying around and going underwater, and that's very earthly. And so if the Greys did evolve alongside of us in cave systems, they would go, well, we need some sort of transport. The UFOs that we see may not be what we think. It may not be the level of technology we think. It may be, and they have simply, over the years, not burned every library during every single war. They could have been more cunning and more thoughtful and evolved along a path where they were focusing on inventing things. It could be. I mean, who knows? Who knows? I would say that the UFOs that we see aren't as advanced as we think they are. That's my personal theory, that they're not this super advanced craft. It's just something we don't know because we haven't needed to know. So let's wrap this up in a bow. Gray aliens are a breakaway of dolphins, and they've not lived among us, but they've lived alongside of us for as long as we've been around. Deep in the cave systems, right now, not traveling from some far across galaxy, but right now, there could be, could you imagine, that's the thing, people talk about the panic that would set in if the government released documents saying that aliens were real. And people go, no, they wouldn't. Imagine if the government released documents saying that aliens are real, but they're actually on Earth, we can't find them, and they've been here for 10 million years. That would be far more disturbing than coming from outer space. Because then you'd go, well, what do? Do we blow up our own planet? It's not like they're an invading force. They're here. And there's millions of them. They're in the caves. What are we going to do? Gas every single cave on the planet and get a bunch of UFOs attacking us? I think that would be more disturbing. Because that would really make you rethink every single point of human history and go, well, maybe aliens did do that. Maybe Jesus was an alien. Maybe religion is fake, blah, blah, blah. Religion has configured itself to say, yeah, there's probably life out there. But religion, I don't think, could deal with the idea that there is life here that is smarter than we are. We are no longer masters of our own planet. It's one thing to have a rat infestation in your house, and it's another thing to move in a house that the rats already own. One, you are defending your own home, and in the other, you're on their turf, and you're playing by their rules. That, I think, is far creepier than any gray alien story I've heard. That was a clip from our daily podcast, Dead Rabbit Radio. Dead Rabbit Radio is available anywhere that you listen to podcasts. It's daily paranormal, conspiracy, and true crime news. If you want to hear the full episode that this clip came from, check the link below. Please like and subscribe. And hit that little bell, too. That does some magical stuff. Thanks, guys.